Hello there, everybody, and welcome back to From a Certain Point of View. This is the Last of Us Episode 2 review. This episode is titled Infected, and I'm really excited to talk about this episode. If you watched my first review of the first episode, then you know that I felt that was like the perfect setup episode, a great pilot episode. I gave that one a 10 out of 10, was my review on that one. And I mean, in episode two, the momentum continues with this show. I think it was an excellent episode two. If I had to give episode two a score out of 10, it would be a 9. And in this video, I'm going to tell you why that is. Um, so, once again, like with the first episode, we get a flashback to sort of the beginning of the outbreak and everything, right before it got out. The cordyceps. Infection, fungal infection, and we have a mycologist who is actually taken to um, one of the first victims of cordyceps, and it's just a very chilling scene of her examining the body um, and just like telling this military officer basically that there's no vaccine or treatment, and for a fungal infection in humans, this basically shouldn't even be happening in a human being. Just like the first episode flashback kind of alluded to. And he's asking her basically, what do we do? We brought you in, you're an expert in studying fungi and everything, and her advice is to bomb the city, bomb everybody in it. And she just wants to go and spend time with her family because she knows where this is going to go ultimately. And this is again like the end game type of infection, unlike a viral infection that is usually stopped with a vaccine or that type of thing. Like, this is a very different beast altogether. So I thought that was just a great scene in the beginning. It was a chilling scene, and I've been watching the inside the episodes after each episode, and then also listening to the Last of Us podcast, which is an official HBO podcast with Craig Mason, who's one of the showrunners, Neil Druckmann, who was a co-creator of the game, and um, also the actor who played Joel in the video game. So it's a really interesting deep dive into the show. And um, they really wanted to go and tell more of the backstory for the show than the game was able to do, or than the game did. And I really like that. I like getting these looks, back to the beginning and how this all started. So I'm a fan of that. Um, but after we jump into the present timeline, and basically Joel and Tess are still very leery about this situation with Ellie. I think Joel more so than Tess. He, is very pessimistic about the whole thing, and they're both basically um, watching over Ellie as she wakes up, and they're ready to shoot her if needed if she's infected. They still don't fully know if she's going to be infected or not, or if she's immune. um and I'll tell you what, Ellie, played by Bella Ramsey, is just, she has some serious sass and some attitude, and her banter with Tess and Joel and everything is just fantastic. I think they really did an excellent job casting. And at first I wasn't sure about Bella Ramsey or Pedro Pascal, but I think the casting was spot on with these actors. Um, and Anna Torv, who plays Tess as well. So this episode really has the feel of the video game in so many moments in this episode. There were some incredible shots of Boston in ruin with the overgrown vines and weeds and everything just taking over the city. And I just thought there were just some great shots that really reminded me of the game. And this exact shot, if you're watching this on YouTube, this shot of the Capitol building just reminded me so much of a shot from the video game. So Ellie even references in this episode the exploding fungus spores that we see in the game, but we're not going to see that in the show, I'm thinking, because again, the creators behind this show talked about how there are some differences between the game and the show and everything. And for me, it hasn't been any deal breakers yet, but in the game, you could be infected by being bitten or with the spores and everything. But in the show, it's a little bit different. But I did like that mention of the spores and everything, since we're not actually seeing those in the show. There were also, parts of this episode, other parts of this episode that really reminded me of the game and everything. And the inside of the hotel that was underwater looked so much like the game to me. The way that Ellie had her flashlight attached to her backpack um, was very reminiscent of the game, and her red hoodie and jeans and everything. The wardrobes, the choices, the um, things that happened, like Ellie crossing rooftops on a plank of wood towards the end of the episode, like all these things. And it really captured the feel of the game. This episode was really tense, and I could feel that tension. I was on the edge of my seat when they were inside the museum, and they were trying they knew there were the clickers in there, which are, like these heavily infected people, and they're trying to quietly walk up the steps and be silent, and you hear like the sound of the clicker and everything, and that sound is such an iconic sound for probably now TV show watchers and those that play the video game. So I am overall, again, I really enjoyed this episode. I thought it was once again very well done. But I am going to get into some more spoiler territory here. So if you haven't watched the episode yet, make sure you go back and watch it before you continue on with this review. But ultimately, I knew, and I thought it was going to be in this episode when Tess would probably meet her end. In the game, she gets infected and then she gets shot. It's a little bit different, and I think it's maybe more interesting the way they did it in the TV show, her death and everything, and she kind of goes out with more of a bang. Um, but as I mentioned earlier, Joel is he's kind of lost hope, and but Tess sees Ellie as this ray of hope that maybe there could be a cure, maybe there could be hope, and for them to win in some way in this ongoing battle with this infection. And it really takes, Tess this whole time is just trying to push Joel, because in that direction of hope and everything, because he's really just not buying into any of this. In the beginning of the episode, he says, "Oh, I've heard this all before with somebody being immune and finding a cure," and he's just not buying it. So in this episode, while they're inside the museum, and this happens off screen, Tess does get bitten, and the audience doesn't know it yet. Joel doesn't know it yet. But Ellie is the first one to kind of suspect it later when they're in the Capitol building towards the end of the episode. And another thing that kind of differed in this episode that was interesting was, just and I thought, first of all, before I get to that, I thought they did an incredible job with the design of the clickers. And on the inside of the episode, at the end of the episode, they show you like how they did the design for them and everything. And I'm so glad they went with practical effects. Everything in this show seems very grounded and very real, and they nailed the look and sound of the clickers absolutely. So they did a fantastic job with that. One thing they added, another element they added to the show that wasn't in the game, was that all the infected are connected in a way through the fungal connections that they have, even through the fungus that grows in the ground and everything. That wasn't in the game. So I was kind of questioning that a little bit, but in the podcast, I believe, or even in the inside the episode, they talk about why that is, and there's kind of a scientific explanation behind it, that fungi actually are connected and everything like that. And so I was satisfied enough, I guess, with that explanation to let it go. And again, I talked about how Tess kind of goes out with a bang in the end of this episode, and she really does, as they again march toward the Capitol building at the end, and she reveals that she's infected. And she basically tells Joel, "Okay, you need to get her out of here." And she says to him, "Save who you can save," because Joel so badly wanted to save his daughter in the first episode, and he's still trying to save his daughter, and maybe now through Ellie, like that scene at the end of the first episode when he just beats that guy, that guard, that Fedra guard, who, he flashes back to that moment when his daughter was shot in his arms, and he doesn't want to see that happen again, and he kind of goes into that rage mode. And I think what Tess is trying to say to him is, save who you can save. You cannot save your daughter. You can't save me, but you can save her. And she showed her the physical evidence of like how quickly the infection took her after being bit, compared to Ellie, who was bit days ago and still isn't infected, and just trying to get him to believe in her, and believe in this possibility, and have hope. So I think that I like that message, and the way her character goes out in this episode is because of that connection through all the fungus and everything. They kind of detect where they are, and they're all coming, like there's a whole bunch of infected like coming for them in the Capitol building. And she basically, pours gasoline everywhere, throws some grenades down, and she's going to try to light it up, and just take as many down with her as she can, while Joel and Ellie escape. And I think that was pretty cool. The one nitpick I had about this scene was, there's this moment where one of the infected sees her, because they're all running past her at first in the Capitol building, and this one, you know, I don't know if it's a full clicker, and it might be, but this one infected like sees her and goes to her, and it's almost like a weird kind of kissing scene with the way that he and chooses to infect her with it and everything. And I didn't like that. I wasn't a fan of that. So that kind of dropped my score a little bit, hence the 9 out of 10. And but still, this was another really good episode. And Tess tells Joel, and what we're looking towards in the next episode is Joel is going to take Ellie to Bills, who was a character from the game. And I think this character and Frank are going to be expanded upon in the show. So I'm interested to see that. Bill was a very great character in the game, definitely made an impression. So I'm looking forward to see episode 3. But let me know, what did you think of this episode? Let me know in the comments section, and stay tuned to From a Certain Point of View for future reviews of The Last of Us. And everything I said was true from a certain point of view.